the soporifics.
Please.
Won't hurt the ember.
I don't know. They're mutant.
The story opens back in 2008 on the isolated Atlantic outpost known as Isla Santor, a place most maps ignore, and for good reason. Deep in the jungle, Inzan had built a hidden dinosaur research facility where genetic work wasn't just advanced, it was reckless. Scientists there weren't simply bringing back dinosaurs. They were splicing, mutating, and engineering creatures that nature never intended. Some of the resulting animals were so distorted they barely resembled anything from the fossil record. Then a stupid mistake set everything off. One distracted worker casually tossed a candy wrapper in the wrong place. It clogged a vent intake and triggered a chain reaction. Airflow failed, pressure spiked, and the facility's environmental controls began shutting down one by one. In the confusion, the island's automated security grid glitched, doors unlocked, alarms desynced, containment barriers lost power. That's when the lab's worst creation escaped. A twisted Tyrannosaurus variant, a six-limbed genetic nightmare the staff had nicknamed the Distortus Rex, smashed its way out and tore through the compound like a living disaster. The worker responsible didn't get a second chance. Within minutes, the base became a slaughterhouse. With emergency systems collapsing and the monster loose, the remaining personnel had only one option: evacuate immediately. Isla Santor was abandoned in panic, leaving behind ruined labs and whatever else had been bred there. The timeline jumps forward to 2025, 5 years after the events that reshaped the world in the previous era of dinosaur chaos. Now, a corporate power player named Martin Krebs, operating on behalf of pharmaceutical giant Parker Genetics, is quietly assembling a mission no government wants to touch. The company is racing to finalize a revolutionary treatment designed to prevent coronary heart disease, a medical breakthrough that could save millions and generate unimaginable profit. But there's a catch. The drug requires rare genetic material taken from 3 massive apex-level species, each representing a different domain of Earth's ecosystem: the ocean titan, Mosasaurus the land colossus, Titanosaurus the ruler of the skies, Quetzalcoatlus, and the DNA must come from living specimens, fresh, active, uncontaminated. So Martin funds a $20 million black-budget expedition and hires a specialist team. Zora, a former Special Forces operative with covert extraction experience, Dr. Henry Loomis, a paleontologist brought in for identification and risk assessment, Duncan, the expedition commander who runs the ship and logistics, and several hardened contractors Martin trusts to keep the operation quiet. Once the last supplies are locked down, the team heads for the Forbidden Island. Before they arrive, Martin shares intel he's been collecting. The Mosasaurus has been repeatedly spotted in equatorial waters, never roaming far. Zora questions it. Why would something that powerful stay confined to a single band of ocean? Henry explains it in plain terms. The planet's modern climate isn't friendly to dinosaur physiology anymore. Oxygen levels, temperatures, and ecosystems have shifted too far from what these animals evolved for. Only the equatorial zone still resembles the ancient conditions: hotter, heavier air, and stable warmth. So the Mosasaurus sticks close to the only region it can reliably thrive in. Martin's only instruction is oddly intense: get the samples fast, don't explore, don't linger. He doesn't say what he's worried about, just that the island is not a place to get curious. At the same time, not far from their route, a man named Ruben Delgado is out on the water with his family, enjoying what's supposed to be a calm day at sea. His older daughter, Teresa, suddenly spots something breaking the surface in the distance. Her younger sister, Isabella, assumes it's a dolphin, but Teresa notices the fin shape is wrong. Too tall, too rigid, too predatory. Before they can react, something massive slams into their yacht. The vessel lurches, tilts, and then rolls violently. Within moments, it's capsized. Inside the cabin, Teresa's boyfriend Xavier gets trapped. Ruben yells for him to grab the radio and force his way out through a window. They manage to escape, but the terror isn't over. The creature surfaces again, fast, and charges straight at Xavier. With nothing else to do, Xavier kicks hard for the overturned hull, clinging to it just in time as the beast snaps past him. Ruben finally gets a clear look at what hit them. It's the Mosasaurus. Not long after, Duncan's radio picks up a distress transmission. The signal matches Ruben's location. Zora argues they should stop and pull the survivors out before it becomes a recovery mission. But one of the contractors, Bobby, pushes back immediately. He doesn't want delays, doesn't want complications, and definitely doesn't want witnesses. To him, every extra minute risks the payout and the mission. Martin agrees, insisting they stay on course. Duncan, however, makes the call. They're rescuing them. It's his ship, his rules. Martin fumes, but he can't override Duncan without blowing the operation apart. They reach the survivors floating amid wreckage. Ruben tells them what attacked, but something about it doesn't sit right. He swears it moved differently than expected. And in the distance, another fin slices the water, not matching the Mosasaurus profile. Duncan orders radar online. 2 massive contacts appear, closing quickly. The ship's alarm screams. A heartbeat later, a violent impact jolts the deck. A gigantic Mosasaurus erupts from the waves and surges alongside them, pacing the vessel like it owns the ocean. Zora sprints to the front, clips into a safety tether, steadies her aim, and raises a dart launcher designed to pull a blood sample with a syringe payload. She fires, then the monster slams the ship again. Henry reacts instantly, yanking Zora back before the next hit can fling her into the sea. She regains position, re-aims, and shoots again. This time the dart sticks. The injector fills automatically and ejects itself, deploying a small chute so it could drift back to the deck without being lost to the water. Henry snatches it up the moment it lands. Sample 1, secured. The crew breaks into relieved celebration until the ocean around them changes. Dorsal fins rise in multiple directions, circling the ship in a tightening ring. But these aren't mosasaur fins. They're attached to something else. Amphibious Spinosaurus. And they're not here to watch. The Spinosaurus weren't acting randomly. Over time, they developed a hunter's partnership with the Mosasaurus, driving prey toward it, cutting off escapes, then feeding on what was left. A brutal trade, assistance in exchange for shared meals. Bobby, still convinced brute force could solve everything, raised his weapon and talked like he was about to clear the water. He had no idea what he was dealing with. These weren't animals that flinched at gunfire. They were predators refined by ages of domination. He didn't even get a warning. A Spinosaurus burst out of the water like a missile, jaws snapping shut in one clean motion, and Bobby was gone. No straged. No scream that lasted more than a second. Before the shock could settle, the Mosasaurus slammed the ship again. The entire vessel shuddered and leaned so hard it nearly rolled. In the chaos, Isabella slipped, sliding out of the cabin opening. Reuben lunged and caught her at the last moment, fingers locking around her wrist just in time. The coastline was getting closer. Seeing their only chance, Duncan shoved the engines to maximum, trying to reach shallower water where the Mosasaurus couldn't maneuver as easily. Reuben told Teresa to radio for help, but Martin snapped into action, trying to stop her. A distress call would expose everything. The mission, the company, the illegal extraction. In the struggle, Teresa lost her balance and tumbled over the side. She hit the ocean hard, screaming for someone, anyone, to pull her up. Martin looked down at her and did nothing. He simply watched as she sank beneath the surface. Xavier didn't hesitate. He grabbed the rescue rig and threw himself in after her like instinct had taken the wheel. Realizing the monster had fully committed to the ship as its target, Reuben made a split-second decision. He took Isabella's hand, and the two of them jumped into the sea, gambling on distance and luck. Right then, the Mosasaurus hammered the vessel again and again, driving it like a battering ram until it crashed into the rocky edge of the island. The hull groaned, split, and began to come apart. The one piece of good news: they'd been shoved into a shallow stretch where the Mosasaurus couldn't close in without beaching itself. Duncan yelled for everyone to abandon ship. He stayed at the controls, guiding the ruined vessel forward until it scraped fully into the shallows. One by one, they splashed into the water and staggered toward land. Not long after, the Delgado family regrouped, shaken, soaked, but alive. Martin's crew made it too, barely. But the ship was a total loss. No engine, no return trip, no escape route. They were stranded. As the survivors scrambled to drag what supplies they could onto the shore, Nina waited back for more crates. She didn't see the danger until it was already behind her. A Spinosaurus rose silently from the reeds and struck. Before anyone could raise a weapon, it lunged and swallowed her in front of everyone, leaving the group frozen in horror. Zora, watching the creature move, narrowed her eyes. Something about it looked off. The proportions, the skin texture, the way it carried itself. These weren't normal animals. That's when Martin finally stopped dodging the truth. He admitted the island was the same location where Inzin's genetic program had collapsed years earlier. After the incident, the facility had been locked down, but no one ever cleaned up what was left behind. The monsters still roaming the island weren't survivors of nature. They were products. The Mosasaurus they'd encountered, and these amphibious Spinosaurus hunting beside it, were both engineered outcomes of those failed experiments. Then, from deep inside the jungle, a roar tore through the air, low, monstrous, and way too close for comfort. Everyone understood the same thing. Staying on the beach was suicide. But without a ship, leaving the island wasn't an option. Fortunately, Zora had planned for failure. Before the mission, she'd quietly arranged a backup extraction, a separate rescue unit monitoring their frequency. If the team went silent and failed to check in, the rescue crew would come in by helicopter within 24 hours. So now they had a deadline. They had one day to finish the job and reach the central helipad before help arrived, or before the island decided to erase them. With time bleeding away, the group pushed inland, trekking through thick, ancient-looking wilderness that felt like stepping backward in history. It didn't take long before they found their next objective, the Titanosaurus, the greatest landmass animal ever to walk the planet. Towering adults loomed over the trees like moving hills, easily reaching absurd sizes, their footsteps vibrating through the ground. Despite their scale, they were calm herbivores. Peaceful, but the team wasn't there to admire them. Zora lined up a shot and fired an automated dart into one of the giants. The animal barely reacted, just a slow, indifferent shift of its massive body. Moments later, the device completed its draw and popped free. Second sample obtained. From higher ground, the view was unreal. Dozens of Titanosaurus filling the valley, necks drifting like cranes as they fed. An awe-inspiring scene that almost made the danger feel distant. Almost. That's when Zora noticed movement far off on a jagged cliff, wings, silhouette, and scale that could only belong to their final target, the massive sky predator Quetzalcoatlus. Elsewhere on the island, the Delgado family had their own nightmare unfolding. For a brief moment, things felt lighter when a small, curious herbivore, an aqualops, wandered near them. Isabella even laughed, and the tension cracked just a little. Then the air changed. A strange odor drifted in, sharp, sour, wrong. The aqualops sensed it first. It stiffened, then bolted as if something invisible had screamed, "Run." Ahead, they spotted an old, abandoned boat half hidden near the waterline. If it could float, it might be their ticket off the island. Teresa cautiously entered the shallow river and swam toward it. Climbing onto the platform, she froze. There was a dinosaur carcass sprawled across the deck, rotting, picked apart. As she stepped closer, a small scavenger dinosaur feeding on the remains lifted its head and noticed her. It hissed a warning, then vanished into the jungle like it had just seen something far worse than a human. Teresa was halfway onto the boat when her stomach dropped. Right beside the platform, half hidden in shadow and mud, lay a sleeping Tyrannosaurus. Its ribs rose and fell slowly, each breath sounding like a warning. For a second, no one dared move. On the shore, Reuben waved frantically, mouthing for her to come back now. But Teresa swallowed her fear. Step by step, she moved like a ghost, placing each foot down with painful care. The Tyrannosaur didn't stir. She reached the boat, and then she found it. An emergency inflatable raft, still strapped in a storage compartment. Her hand shook as she yanked it free and dragged it out onto the platform. The little aqualops returned, curious again, but Isabella hissed for it to stay back and tossed some food away from the raft, baiting it to wander off and stop making noise. Teresa hit the pump switch. The raft inflated fast, too fast, loud and sudden in the quiet. The rubber walls expanded with a sharp hiss. Teresa glanced back. The Tyrannosaur was gone. A wave of panic ripped through the group until they saw it nearby at the riverbank, lowering its head to drink. It hadn't left. It was still close. They didn't waste a second. All four scrambled onto the raft and pushed off. The movement and splashing finally drew the predator's attention. The Tyrannosaur snapped its head up and let out a roar that made the trees tremble. Then it charged straight into the water after them. "Paddle!" Isabella screamed. The raft shot downstream, wobbling hard as the current pulled it forward. The Tyrannosaur kept pace along the bank. Then the water deepened, and the giant predator disappeared beneath the surface. For a beat, everything went silent. Then the monster erupted from below, ramming the raft with its skull and flipping it upside down like a toy. The world became bubbles, river churn, and terrified scrambling. But something about the attack felt wrong. The Tyrannosaur wasn't biting. It wasn't trying to tear them apart. It was shoving, tossing, almost playing with them the way a cat toys with prey before deciding whether to finish it. They fought through the chaos and surfaced, coughing and gasping, only to realize Isabella was missing. They heard faint thumping under the overturned raft as it drifted dangerously close to the Tyrannosaur again. The animal opened its jaws and clamped down. Reuben screamed, sure his daughter was gone. But the current carried something past them. Isabella, alive, floating on her back, half-conscious but still breathing. The Tyrannosaur followed her for a short distance, watching, then eventually lost interest and turned away. A moment later, the river burped up something else, the inflatable raft, surfacing again downstream, as if the island itself refused to let it stay buried. On the opposite side of Isla Santor, Zora's team reached a towering cliff wall, jagged and wind-carved. They clipped into harnesses, checked knots, and began descending one at a time. This final phase wasn't about drawing blood. To avoid a direct fight with their airborne target, the plan was to collect genetic material from the eggs of the Quetzalcoatlus, an apex sky predator so dangerous that confronting an adult head-on would be suicide. Its nest sat impossibly high, built into the cliff line where only rope access was feasible. As they searched for a safe approach, Duncan noticed something unnatural under the grass: stonework, a partially buried structure, an ancient ruin that didn't belong in this jungle, a weathered temple, and beneath it, a path leading toward the nesting area. It quickly became clear the creature had claimed the ruins as part of its territory. Inside, scattered across the stone floor, lay more than a dozen unhatched eggs, massive, pale, and intact. Henry carefully prepared his syringe equipment and began extracting from one egg with precision, keeping the membrane undamaged. Then a piercing shriek knifed through the air. The adult had returned. The Quetzalcoatlus swooped in and landed with a force that shook dust from the ceiling. The moment it saw intruders, it snapped into rage, beak swinging like a blade as it lunged forward with terrifying speed. Everyone froze. In a scramble to retreat, Henry fumbled, dropping the sample container. It clattered across stone and stopped near a carved altar. Henry and Cleric were pinned in place, barely breathing. Outside, Cleric tried to distract it, hurling a tool toward the far side of the ruin. The sound drew the creature's attention, but it didn't calm it. It got worse. The Quetzalcoatlus shrieked again and surged out of the temple, wings beating like thunder. Cleric bolted, shouting for Duncan, who began hauling him upward via rope. But mid-flight, the creature snagged the rope with its claws. The line jerked violently. Henry was ripped from the doorway and dragged into open air. The sample, by sheer luck, had slid to a spot beside him and remained unbroken. Cleric wasn't as fortunate. The Quetzalcoatlus folded its wings and dove. In one brutal snap, it caught Cleric in its beak, banked once in the air, and swallowed him whole before anyone could react. Now it turned toward Duncan and Martin. Martin clutched the sample case and ran, but the Quetzalcoatlus blocked the path, hurting them like prey. At the last second, they dove into the narrow tunnel they'd found earlier, barely escaping as the creature's beak slammed into stone behind them. Below, Henry scrambled to the altar, snatched the dropped sample, and looked up, only to see the rope fibers above him unraveling. The line snapped. He fell. A thick layer of giant leaves broke part of the drop, and he crashed hard into a pond, bruised, shaken, but alive. Not long after, the remaining members regrouped on the ground. All 3 DNA objectives were finally secured. Now the mission changed. Locate the Delgado family, reach the helipad, and get off Isla Santor before the island finished what it started. Around the same time, the Delgado family reached the island's central zone, the area once used for cross-species testing, now reduced to broken concrete, rusted frames, and swallowed corridors. Elsewhere, Duncan's group also arrived near the central helipad. Zora spotted a trail of footprints leading toward it, fresh enough to matter. By nightfall, both groups finally stumbled into each other in the heart of the island. The moment Teresa saw Martin, her restraint snapped. She stormed forward and accused him in front of everyone, telling them how he'd blocked her from calling for help and how he'd watch her fall into the ocean without lifting a hand. Arguments erupted. Then the ground vibrated. A deep mechanical rumble rolled through the valley, ancient and impossible. Somehow, the island's dormant power system had restarted. Lights flickered across the ruins. Old flood lamps groaned awake. Panels sparked. Doors whined as if trying to remember how to function. And with the light came movement. From the shadows emerged new horrors, creatures that shouldn't exist. One of them was Mutadon, a hybrid built from raptor intelligence and pterosaur traits. Fast, calculating, and capable of gliding through the air like a silent executioner. The moment the Mutadons appeared, the entire camp exploded into chaos. Everyone scattered, diving behind rubble, broken walls, and abandoned equipment wherever they could find a shadow. Zora slid under the frame of a wrecked vehicle and held her breath, watching the movement of claws and wings through gaps in the metal. Martin, on the other hand, panicked in the loudest way possible. He tried to fight back, unloading rounds at the creatures. It was useless. His shots were wild, unfocused, and desperate. Nothing that actually stopped a predator built for speed. One Mutadon sprang forward, snatched Martin up, and flung him across the concrete like he weighed nothing. Strangely, it didn't finish him. It tossed him aside like a message. This isn't the real punishment yet. Nearby, the Delgado family sprinted into an abandoned supermarket. Rows of toppled shelves and stale packaging everywhere, like the island had frozen mid-collapse. For a brief second, they thought they'd lost whatever was hunting them. Then something moved above. A Mutadon crawled out from a ceiling vent, claws scraping metal as it lowered itself into the aisles. The family reacted instantly, dropping flat and sliding under a row of shelves before it could spot them. Reuben scanned the floor in desperation and noticed a sewer access grate. As the creature crept between aisles, sniffing and clicking softly, the family quietly lifted the grate and slipped into the darkness below, escaping into the sewer tunnels just as the Mutadon turned toward their hiding spot. At the same time, Duncan and Henry accidentally made their way into the core of the old facility, the original lab center where the worst hybrid work had been carried out. The air felt dead in there, like the building itself still remembered what happened. Duncan powered up a few batter monitors and discovered something crucial. A small escape boat was docked at the end of a tunnel route leading straight to the ocean. Then, overhead, a familiar thumping shook the ceiling. A rescue helicopter. It was finally here. Duncan told Henry to signal it immediately while he ran to track down the others. But the moment Duncan disappeared into the corridors, Henry heard a low, unnatural growl behind him. He turned, saw nothing clearly, but the sound alone was enough to lock his blood in place. Whatever it wasn't one of the smaller hybrids. When the presence shifted away, Henry didn't hesitate. He sprinted out of the lab, scrambling toward open ground to mark their position. Outside, Martin was already broken. He wasn't listening to Zora anymore, wasn't coordinating, wasn't thinking. He jumped into a jeep and floored it, choosing selfish survival over any plan. The Mutadons didn't bother following the jeep. They'd already picked up something better, the scent trail drifting up from the tunnels. One of them ripped a manhole cover open and dropped into the sewer like it was diving into home territory. Zora saw it happen and immediately followed, weapon up, refusing to let the family die underground. Up in the sky, the helicopter circled, searching, hesitating. It couldn't stay long. If it didn't confirm survivors, it would pull out and leave the island behind. Henry understood the clock ticking. He fired a flare straight into the air. The bright streak caught the helicopter's attention instantly, but it also drew something else. A shadow rose behind Henry. Massive, silent, wrong. Henry turned, thinking he was looking at the helicopter's lights through trees. He wasn't. From the darkness, a colossal mutant stepped into view. Its shape distorted, its frame unnatural, its movement too controlled for something so huge. The Distortus Rex. The same nightmare that had triggered the original massacre years ago. The helicopter didn't even have time to pull away. The monster clamped its jaws around it, crushing metal and glass in one violent bite. The rotor screamed, then died. The aircraft folded and dropped, destroyed before it ever truly had chance. With the chopper gone, the only remaining exit was the tunnel route to the sea and the boat Duncan had found. Deep in the sewer system, Zora caught up to the Delgado family, and right behind them, the Mutadon followed, slipping through the tunnel bends like a trained assassin. This time, Zora didn't miss. She fired controlled bursts, every shot placed with purpose. The hybrid stumbled, twitched, and finally collapsed, motionless in the shallow water. No time to celebrate. They ran toward the ocean exit and found a heavy steel gate blocking the way. Worse, more Mutadons were closing in from behind, their clicking cries echoing through the tunnel like warning sirens. Then came the small voice no one expected. Isabella. She spotted a narrow gap near the gate frame, barely enough space. Before anyone could stop her, she squeezed through and sprinted toward the control console on the other side. Zora shouted for her to come back. Too late. Isabella reached for the switch, and the Distortus Rex appeared behind her, silent as a shadow. The group screamed her name, trying to draw the monster's attention away. Isabella didn't freeze. She slammed the lever down. The gate machinery groaned, and the steel doors began to rise, slowly, painfully. The Distortus Rex's warped face filled the widening gap like a nightmare crawling into daylight. Then headlights blasted through the darkness. Martin, returning. He hadn't come back to help. He'd gotten lost, driven in circles, and accidentally looped back toward the noise. But fate finally found him. The Distortus Rex snapped him up in one motion, lifted him like a rag doll, and tore him apart, ending his greed in a single brutal second. Zora grabbed the sample case from what he'd dropped, and the group sprinted toward the dock. Their escape boat was there, but the crane mechanism lowering it jammed halfway. Metal screeched. The boat hung at an angle, close enough to see, too high to launch, and the Distortus Rex was already charging. With no time left, Duncan made a decision before anyone could argue. He lit a flare and waved it high, becoming the brightest target on the dock. He was pulling the monster off them. Then he dove into the water and swam, dragging the flare's glow away from the boat as far as he could. The flare sputtered above the waves. Duncan pushed until his arms were empty and his lungs burned, until he couldn't go farther. In that brief opening, Zora forced the crane to release enough slack. The boat splashed free. They started the engine and tore away into the dark water, barely escaping the shoreline. Duncan didn't surface. Behind them, the Distortus Rex returned to the dock, roaring at the empty air in rage. Zora looked back at the black ocean, devastated, knowing what Duncan had done for them. Then a sharp light flashed in the distance. A flare, a silhouette. Duncan alive. Somehow he'd survived. After everything, the terror, the loss, the impossible escapes, the survivors were left with a different kind of silence. The kind that makes you rethink what life is worth. And in the end, Zora made the choice Martin never would. Instead of letting corporate greed lock the DNA away, she decided to release the samples publicly, hoping the science would be used to help people, not to enrich a single company. Analysis, you know that feeling. The moment when you hear that familiar Jurassic theme swell, and for just a second, you're 8 years old again, staring at a screen, convinced dinosaurs might actually be real. But then the music fades, and what you're left with is a question. Why are we still here? Not on the island, not in the franchise, but in this story. Because Jurassic World, Rebirth doesn't just want to thrill you. It wants to justify its own existence. This isn't just another sequel. It's not simply bigger dinosaurs, louder roars, or more expensive destruction. Rebirth arrives with something to prove, to fans, to critics, and to a franchise that's been wrestling with its own legacy for over 3 decades. Tonight, we're doing a full, deep cinematic breakdown. No dash opinions. No surface-level takes. We're talking story, characters, themes, filmmaking, symbolism, performances, controversy, and yes, whether this movie finally answers the question, can Jurassic still matter in a world that's already seen it all? By the end of this video, you won't just know what Jurassic World Rebirth is about. You'll know what it's trying to say and whether it succeeds. So, let's go back to the beginning. Not the island, the idea. Jurassic World Rebirth released in 2025, positioning itself as both a continuation and a soft reinvention of the Jurassic saga. The film is directed by Gareth Edwards, a filmmaker known for blending massive scale with intimate human perspective. If you've seen his work before, you know he has a talent for making spectacle feel grounded, almost mournful. The screenplay comes from David Koepp, returning to the franchise after years away. That alone raised eyebrows, because Koepp helped shape the DNA of the original Jurassic films. Genre-wise, this is science fiction at its core, but it leans heavily into survival thriller, ecological drama, and even a touch of philosophical horror. The runtime sits just over 2 hours, the language is English, and the production is primarily American, though its global scope is very intentional and very thematic. This isn't just a blockbuster, it's a statement. Here's the spoiler-free version, and trust me, curiosity is part of the experience. Rebirth takes place in a world where dinosaurs are no longer an anomaly, but a consequence. Years after the events that scattered prehistoric life across the planet, humanity is forced to confront a terrifying reality. Coexistence isn't working. Ecosystems are collapsing. Governments are scrambling. Corporations are circling like vultures. And somewhere in the middle of it all are ordinary people trying to survive a world that science broke and capitalism exploited. The story follows a group of individuals pulled into a mission that appears scientific on the surface, but quickly reveals deeper moral and existential stakes. What begins as an attempt to fix the dinosaur problem becomes a confrontation with something far more unsettling. Maybe the problem was never the dinosaurs. The film constantly asks, who gets to decide what nature should look like? And once you play God, do you ever really stop? Rather than relying on constant action, the narrative takes its time. It builds tension through uncertainty, atmosphere, and the slow realization that there may not be a clean solution. And that restraint, that's important. At the heart of Rebirth is a protagonist who isn't a traditional action hero. They're driven not by bravado, but by guilt. This is someone who understands the cost of scientific ambition firsthand. Their motivation isn't to save the world. It's to prevent it from repeating the same mistake again and again under a different corporate logo. Their flaw is hesitation, doubt, the fear that doing nothing might actually be worse than doing the wrong thing. The antagonist, meanwhile, is chilling because they're not a monster. They're not screaming or twirling a mustache. They're calm, polished, rational. They believe the dinosaurs are a resource, a problem that can be optimized, monetized, and controlled. Their ideology is simple. If nature won't obey, it must be redesigned. Supporting characters fill out the moral spectrum. You have believers, skeptics, survivors, and opportunists. Each represents a different human response to catastrophe: fear, denial, control, or acceptance. And the relationships? They're tense, fragile, often built on shared trauma rather than trust. This isn't a team that gels easily, and that friction is the point. This is where Rebirth really earns its title. The central theme isn't dinosaurs. It's human arrogance. The film repeatedly mirrors past mistakes, visually, narratively, and philosophically. We see history looping back on itself, not because people forget, but because they refuse to learn. There's a strong ecological message here, but it's not preachy. Dinosaurs function as symbols of nature's indifference. They're not evil. They don't hate humans. They simply exist. And that's terrifying. Another recurring motif is containment versus coexistence. Fences, cages, zones, and borders appear again and again. Visual reminders of humanity's obsession with control. Even the title, Rebirth, carries dual meaning. Is this the rebirth of balance, or the rebirth of the same cycle under a new name? The movie doesn't give easy answers. It forces you to sit with discomfort. Gareth Edwards directs this film with remarkable restraint. Instead of constant spectacle, he leans into scale and silence. Many of the most effective moments aren't loud. They're quiet, ominous, and deeply unsettling. Edwards understands something crucial. Dinosaurs are scariest when you don't fully see them. The pacing is deliberate, almost patient. Some viewers may find it slow, but that slowness allows tension to breathe. It makes the action hit harder when it finally arrives. Compared to his previous work, Rebirth feels more introspective, less bombastic, more reflective. It's blockbuster filmmaking with an art house soul. Visually, this film is stunning in a grounded way. The camera often sits at human eye level, making dinosaurs feel impossibly large and indifferent. Wide shots emphasize isolation. Tight frames trap characters in their own fear. The color palette shifts depending on theme. Cold blues and grays for control and technology, warmer natural tones for moments of fragile harmony. The visual effects are intentionally understated. Practical effects are blended seamlessly with CGI, giving weight and texture to the creatures. This isn't visual noise. It's visual storytelling. Sound plays a massive role here. The score respects the iconic Jurassic themes, but doesn't rely on them. Instead, it introduces subtle, almost mournful variations that reflect the film's more somber tone. Silence is used brilliantly. The absence of sound often signals danger more effectively than a musical cue ever could. When the dinosaurs roar, it's not triumphant. It's terrifying. It's mournful, like the sound of a world out of balance. The performances across the board are grounded and believable. The lead actor delivers a restrained, emotionally layered performance, never overplaying the drama, never undercutting the stakes. Supporting cast members bring texture and realism, especially in moments of ethical conflict. Conversations feel messy, unresolved, human. Chemistry isn't flashy, but it's authentic. These feel like people thrown together by circumstance, not destiny. And that makes all the difference. The editing favors long takes and measured transitions. There's no frantic cutting for the sake of energy. The rhythm serves the mood, not the marketing. Flashbacks are minimal but purposeful, revealing character motivation rather than exposition. At times, the runtime feels heavy, but it also feels intentional. This is a film that wants you to sit with its ideas. Rebirth arrives at a time when climate anxiety, corporate overreach, and scientific ethics dominate public conversation. That context matters. The film reflects a world where technological solutions often outpace moral consideration, where progress is measured in profit rather than consequence. It's not adapting a book or a true story, but it's absolutely responding to reality. One reading sees Rebirth as a cautionary tale about ecological collapse. Another sees it as a critique of reboot culture itself, a franchise asking whether it deserves to exist anymore. There are visual Easter eggs echoing the original Jurassic Park, but they're often twisted or reframed, suggesting nostalgia without growth is dangerous. The ending, intentionally ambiguous, forces the audience to decide whether hope lies in control or surrender. And that debate, that's the point. Critically, the film sparked division. Some praised its maturity and restraint. Others criticized it for not being fun enough. Audience reactions mirrored that split. Longtime fans appreciated the thoughtful direction, while casual viewers expected more spectacle. Award attention focused more on technical achievements than mainstream wins, but its real impact may be long-term. This is a film people will argue about, and that's a legacy in itself. Its greatest strength is its confidence. It knows what it wants to say and doesn't compromise. The atmosphere, themes, and direction elevated above standard franchise fare. Its weakness? Pacing and expectation. If you want non-stop dinosaur chaos, this may not fully satisfy you. Some character arcs feel intentionally unresolved, which won't work for everyone. But that risk is also what makes it interesting. Jurassic World. Rebirth is bold, reflective, and unapologetically thoughtful. It's not the loudest Jurassic movie, but it might be the most honest. If you're looking for pure nostalgia-fueled action, you may walk away conflicted. But if you want a blockbuster that actually asks why it exists, this one's for you. And maybe, just maybe, it proves that even after all this time, Jurassic still has teeth. Reviews. This latest entry feels like it hits a reset button in the most frustrating way. None of the familiar faces return, and the newcomers don't exactly fill that gap. They mostly bring brand new reasons to roll your eyes. After decades of man-made dinosaur disasters, you'd assume the smartest move would be wiping out every trace of what they created, living creatures and leftover genetic material alike, because this experiment has produced nothing but panic and destruction for 30-plus years. Instead, the movie tells us the dinosaurs have been relocated into habitats where they can supposedly live on their own. That might sound logical, until the film tosses in oddball details like a massive brachiosaurus hanging out under the Brooklyn Bridge, creating a traffic nightmare and irritating Scarlett Johansson's character to no end. It's the kind of moment that feels designed to be a trailer shot more than something that makes sense in the story. The opening sequence goes hard, though, in a grim way. One scientist watches helplessly as another meets a terrifying end, trapped behind a vault door while a T-Rex investigates like a hungry bloodhound. It's tense, ugly, and honestly one of the more effective scenes in the whole film. From there, we're dropped into the now-standard mission structure. A team of scientists led by Johansson heads into tropical territory to collect dinosaur DNA, supposedly to help humanity develop cures for diseases. She's joined by Jonathan Bailey and Mahershala Ali, and the film gets a little action gadget happy, tranq darts flying, tracking devices, and a slightly silly bit where the darted dinos float away with a balloon parachute setup. If you're looking for pure, nostalgia-fueled action, you may. Along the way, the team rescues a family after they're attacked at sea by some monstrous aquatic creature. And of course, the group includes an extra dose of irritation in the form of a young woman, played by Luna Blaze, who insists on adopting a small dinosaur she believes is harmless and plant-eating. Naturally, the creature isn't just a cute tag-along. It becomes a walking warning system, clicking and clacking whenever danger is close. That gimmick gets used exactly as much as you'd expect. The danger escalates fast. A T-Rex chase kicks off after one wakes up from a nap, and later a pterodactyl encounter turns nasty when the group stumbles into its nesting area. The movie does lean into a darker body count than some past installments. At least one major character gets taken out in a brutal, unflinching way, including a moment where someone is basically fed to a flying predator, and you watch the result in a way the film clearly wants you to remember. Oddly enough, the most genuinely affecting scenes aren't the attacks. They're the quieter moments. A Titanosaurus herd shows up, and, for a little while, the movie feels almost peaceful. These giants are calm, almost gentle, and there's even a sense of connection among them. Those sequences actually hint at what the franchise could be when it slows down and leans into awe instead of constant chaos. Visually, it's undeniably big-screen entertainment. There's a Spielberg-style polish to how certain scenes are staged. It looks cinematic even when it's being ridiculous. The effects team clearly worked hard. The dinosaurs are detailed and weighty, and a lot of the creature work is convincing. That said, the what's real and what's digital question is becoming more distracting than impressive these days. Some environments look gorgeous, but others have that glossy, artificial feel that pulls you out of the moment. Where it really struggles for me is the people. The writing for the human characters is the weak link, and that includes the leads. They're not consistently likable, and the dialogue often feels like it's trying to check boxes rather than build personalities you care about. Story-wise, it's entertaining, but also familiar. It follows a pretty predictable franchise recipe. Mission, extraction, chase, escape, bigger threat, repeat. David Koepp doesn't reinvent anything here. It's mostly a remix of stuff we've already seen, with the mutation angle added to make it feel new. In fact, there's one creature in particular, the T-Rex, that I had a hard time buying. It feels like something that wandered in from a sci-fi horror movie rather than belonging in this world. The cast is solid across the board, though. Johansson, Ali, Bailey, Rupert Friend, and Manuel Garcerulfo all bring credibility, and Rupert Friend in particular feels perfectly chosen for his role. He's probably the most memorable presence in the movie, and whether you label him the villain depends on how you interpret the film's moral angle, but he definitely lands. The biggest problem? Length. This kind of movie doesn't need a sprawl. It should be a tight, punchy adventure, around 100 minutes and out. Instead, it drags on nearly an hour longer than it needs to, and you feel that weight as the film repeats beats and stretches sequences past their natural endpoint. So, what's the final verdict? It's basically more of the same, flashy, competent, and easy enough to watch if you're in the mood for popcorn entertainment, but also tedious in ways the franchise didn't used to be. I once thought these were movies you'd happily rewatch. At this point, not so much. And honestly, I get why some people shrug at the criticism and say, it's a dinosaur movie. What were you expecting? Fair point. If this were the first film in a brand new franchise, people would probably celebrate it for the visuals alone. But after so many entries, the familiar structure is harder to ignore. It's enjoyable, yes, but it's also derivative, and you can only remix the same formula so many times. I'm not even sure jump scare is the right label for a fantasy-leaning dino adventure like this, but I'll tell you what, I had the most fun watching my granddaughter more than I was watching the screen at times. During the nail-biting moments, she was twisting her hair, chewing at her nails, bracing herself for whatever surprise was about to burst out of the chaos. Honestly, that alone was worth the ticket. The creature staging was terrific, really tight pacing whenever the monsters were on the move, and the visuals looked fantastic. The cinematography had that big, glossy, you're here with them energy. It ended up being a blast from start to finish, the kind of movie where you keep mentally placing bets. Who's surviving, who's not, and who's about to get the closest call. Is it familiar in structure? Absolutely. But it's the good kind of familiar, like a roller coaster you know is going to drop, yet you still grip the bar anyway. There's plenty of adrenaline, frantic escapes, and near misses that push you right to the edge of your seat. One detail I genuinely liked. The dinosaur name-dropping didn't feel completely recycled. Sure, we've heard about the mosasaur and titanosaur in earlier entries, but this was the first time I remember hearing Quetzalcoatlus in the series. I even looked it up afterward. Turns out those are real, prehistoric animals, just not the ones that dominated the old dinosaur books I grew up with. So hey, points for sending a dino kid, even an older one, down a fun rabbit hole. If the franchise can keep turning out movies with this level of craft and momentum, I'd be shocked if it slows down anytime soon. And yes, I'll happily show up for the next one. Dinosaur kid at heart, always. Now, putting it in the wider series context, the original Jurassic Park is still the gold standard. Jurassic World gave the brand a much-needed jolt of energy again. Dominion, even with beloved faces returning, just didn't land for me. It felt messy and wasted its potential. So expectations for this standalone-style sequel were basically, please, just get the thrill back. With Gareth Edwards at the helm, Monsters, Godzilla, Rogue One, the hope was a sharper, more intense ride. And for the most part, it delivers that return of form feeling. Story setup, rewritten, plot rundown. The movie opens in 2010, years before the chaos at Jurassic World, on a remote InGen research site located on Isle St. Hubert, out in the Atlantic. The scientists there aren't just cloning dinosaurs anymore. They're engineering unstable, hybrid-like transgenic variants. Things go wrong fast when a containment failure lets their worst creation loose. A grotesque, six-limbed tyrannosaur they've nicknamed Distortus Rex. It escapes, kills an employee, and turns the facility into a disaster zone, forcing the staff to abandon the island entirely. Jump forward 17 years. The world has changed again, this time in the dinosaurs' favor, and not in ours. After the fallout of the biosin incident and the transgenic locust crisis, Earth's climate has shifted in ways that make survival difficult for de-extinct species. Many of the remaining dinosaurs are pushed toward equatorial regions where the environment resembles a Mesozoic-style habitat. Those zones are effectively off-limits for travel. A handful of massive herbivores still wander near populated areas, causing public panic and constant disruptions. Enter Zora Bennett, Scarlett Johansson, a former military covert operator who gets pulled into a highly sensitive mission by Martin Krebs, Rupert Friend, a big player at pharmaceutical firm Parker Genix. The assignment is framed as a potential medical breakthrough. Retrieve genetic biomaterial from the 3 largest surviving prehistoric specimens, with the hope it can be used to develop a heart disease treatment. Zora is paired with paleontologist Dr. Henry Loomis, Jonathan Bailey, who's brought in to help track and identify targets. To assemble the rest of the team, they head to Suriname, where Zora reconnects with her longtime friend Duncan Kincaid, Mahershala Ali. Duncan helps put together a hardened crew: boatman Leclerc, Bichur Sylvain, mercenary Nina, Philippine Velge, and security lead Bobby Atwater, Ed Scrane. The plan: reach Al St. Hubert and extract samples from 3 apex-level creatures: an aquatic Mosasaurus, a land-dominating Titanosaurus, and the airborne threat Quetzalcoatlus. At the same time, a civilian family ends up in the worst possible place. Ruben Delgado, Manuel Garcerulfo, is sailing near the island with his daughters Teresa, Luna Blaze, and Isabella, Adrena Miranda, plus Teresa's boyfriend Xavier Dobbs, David Iacono. Their trip turns into a nightmare when the Mosasaurus hits, wrecking their boat and leaving them stranded. Zora's team receives the family's distress signal and hauls them from the water just before the mission spirals. The crew manages to secure the first sample from the Mosasaurus, but the ocean becomes a killing field when the beast returns with additional predators in tow, including a group of Spinosaurus. In the chaos, Bobby is killed. Krebs reveals how far he'll go to protect the secrecy of the operation, even endangering Teresa to keep the radio silent. She's knocked into the water, and he refuses to help her, forcing Xavier and the Delgados to jump in after her. The rescue effort splits the survivors into separate groups. With the ship compromised, Duncan is forced to ground it, while Nina is killed during the escape. Zora tells whoever's left that she's arranged for a helicopter to sweep the island in 24 hours, but until then, they're on their own. Elsewhere on the island, the Delgados push inland, following industrial pipelines in the hope they lead to abandoned infrastructure. Along the way, they run into multiple species, including a small aqualops, which Isabella quickly bonds with and names Dolores. They eventually locate a structure with emergency gear and find an inflatable raft, but danger doesn't let up. They witness a Dilophosaurus feeding on a carcass, and soon after they're chased into a river escape that turns into pure panic when A.T. Rex joins the hunt. They barely survive the rapids and the attack. Meanwhile, Zora's extraction team manages to collect the second sample from the Titanosaurus, then makes a risky move for the final target. They locate a Quetzalcoatlus nesting site and decide the safest option is to take the last sample from an egg rather than face the adult head-on. The plan works, right up until it doesn't. As they climb away from the nest, an adult Quetzalcoatlus attacks, and Leclerc is taken, while the rest are forced into a desperate, scrambling escape across the hillside. As daylight fades, the Delgados regroup with the rest of the expedition at a deserted lab, hoping to flag down a helicopter flying overhead. Tensions explode immediately. Teresa confronts Martin, insisting he was the one who attacked her back on the boat. Martin doesn't argue. He escalates. He pulls a gun, forces everyone to stand down, and snatches the sample case from Zora. Then he bolts. Martin steals a vehicle and speeds off, desperate to reach the helipad on his own, leaving the others to fend for themselves. And they don't get a moment to breathe because the island has other plans. A pack of twisted dino nightmares, raptor and pterosaur crossbreeds the group dubs Mutodons, descends on them. The survivors retreat into a subterranean tunnel system, basically trading one kind of danger for another. Above ground, the rescue helicopter finally appears when Henry fires off a flare, but hope lasts about 2 seconds. The aircraft is swatted out of the sky by the Distortus Rex, which turns the rescue attempt into a flaming disaster. Martin doesn't get far either. The Distortus Rex catches up to him, and he's gone, quickly and brutally, while the others keep pushing through the tunnels. When they finally emerge, they find a locked gate separating them from a dock and a boat that could be their ticket out. Isabella, being the smallest, squeezes through a gap to reach the latch from the other side. She unlocks the gate, the group piles onto the boat, and they make a run for it as the Distortus Rex closes in again. Duncan stays behind long enough to draw it away with another flare, an old-school distraction move that actually works. Zora, Henry, Ruben, Teresa, Xavier, and Isabella escape. And Duncan? Against the odds, he survives too, helped by the chaos of an explosion that buys him just enough time. The final note swings back to the why of the mission. Zora still has the locked case of recovered samples. In a rare moment of decency for a movie full of greedy motives, Henry and Zora agree the resulting heart disease medication won't be locked behind patents, meaning the cure won't be treated like a luxury item. The supporting cast gets a quick spotlight too. Adam Loxley as Williams, Nia Finley as DeSanto, Lucy Thackeray as the helicopter pilot, Johnny Lavelle as the co-pilot, and Billy Smith as the cop. Small roles, but they help fill out the world. As for the performances, Johansson sells the hardened mercenary energy really well. Mahershala Ali works smoothly as the reliable second-in-command type. Rupert Friend does fine as the inevitable snake-in-the-grass villain, though it's not exactly a shocking turn. But let's be honest, the humans aren't the main attraction. The dinosaurs are the headliners, and the film knows it. The CGI is impressively polished, with several tense chases and big action beats staged across ocean sequences, dense jungle runs, precarious cliffs, rough waters, and cramped enclosed routes where escape feels impossible. It throws in only light nods to earlier films, and the storyline mostly stands on its own, more adventure ride than heavy nostalgia. In terms of vibe, it reminded me a bit of that lean, pulpy, survival-forward energy from Jurassic Park 3. Overall, it's an upgrade from some of the franchise's recent Messier entries, and I stayed engaged. A fun sci-fi action thriller, even if it isn't trying to be deep. Now the honest part, I love dinosaurs, and I've always liked ScarJo. So Jurassic World, Rebirth was basically guaranteed to end up on my watch list. And the movie itself? It's exactly what you think it is, a brain-off blockbuster. It's the kind of film that works best when you stop asking questions. The moment you start applying logic about the mission, the decisions, the conveniently timed escapes, you'll start poking holes in it, and the illusion collapses. The opening takes its time introducing a bunch of characters with sad backstories, but it doesn't give enough context to make you truly care. It wants emotional weight without earning it. But once the story hits the island, the film stops pretending it's character-driven and goes full dinosaur mode. Director Gareth Edwards leans hard into momentum and spectacle, basically delivering the carnivore chaos the audience came for. The structure is familiar. The thinly sketched characters get picked off first, the obvious survivors scrape through, the dinos snap and lunge constantly, but somehow keep missing by inches. Still, the effects work is excellent, and a couple of the deaths are nastier than I expected, in a way that actually feels like the franchise remembering it used to have bite. The downside is that the action beats, while solid, aren't especially iconic. I'm not sure any one set piece will stick with me long term, and it feels like the kind of entry you'll forget as soon as the next sequel trailer drops. There's one standout franchise button moment, a scene of massive dinosaurs moving across the landscape while John Williams' classic theme swells. Pure cinematic comfort food. Also, there's a cute baby dino named Dolores who feels engineered for toy shelves and plushies. And yes, it works. Story-wise, the film leans into the idea that dinosaurs have been largely pushed back by nature and now exist in isolated equatorial pockets, where humans are officially forbidden to interfere. Naturally, a corporate opportunist, Krebs, can't resist exploiting that protected zone rule for profit. He recruits elite operative Zora to retrieve DNA from 3 colossal prehistoric creatures for a heart disease cure, then ropes in a brainy scientist, Loomis, because the tough guys clearly need someone who can actually identify what they're looking at. With Kincaid as the local fixer and the team headed into hostile waters, it's a classic mission goes wrong setup. Meanwhile, The film also follows a sailing family drifting from Bermuda toward Cape Town. Blissfully unaware, they're traveling through waters where do not enter signs might as well be dinner bells. In the end, Rebirth is entertaining in the moment, slick, loud, and easy to watch, just not particularly fresh. It delivers dinosaurs, danger, and big-budget polish, but it doesn't offer much the franchise hasn't already served before. If you want to turn your brain off dino thriller with strong CGI and a few genuinely tense moments, it does the job. If you're hoping for something bold or unforgettable, this probably isn't it. What I can do instead is write a new, original movie review that keeps the same overall theme and opinions you expressed, without being a line-by-line paraphrase of the text you pasted. Here's a fresh review in that spirit. This latest Jurassic outing finally landed on streaming, Peacock, so we threw it on for a relaxed Sunday night watch. And while it's perfectly watchable as a big, glossy creature feature, it's also hard to ignore the nagging sense that the franchise is now running on familiar fuel rather than real inspiration. The setup is classic. A corporate operator with dollar signs in their eyes pushes an expedition into a dangerous no-go zone near the equator, where dinosaurs have essentially been corralled by climate and circumstance into the last places they can survive. The mission is dressed up with a for the greater good medical angle. Something about harvesting genetic material from the biggest prehistoric heavyweights, sea, land, and air, to help develop a breakthrough heart disease treatment. It's a tidy excuse to get people into the worst possible place with the most teeth, which is basically the series' love language at this point. Along the way, the crew runs into a family that's having a truly terrible vacation. Dad, a young daughter, an older daughter with peak teen attitude, and the older daughter's famously unhelpful boyfriend, Xavier. Their boat trip goes sideways in spectacular fashion after an encounter with a very large, very angry marine monster, leaving them stranded and waiting for rescue. Xavier, naturally, manages to keep the on-holiday vibe alive even while the rest of the group is processing the fact they're now part of food chain. From there, the film splits into two lanes that don't really elevate each other. On one side, the family scrambles to survive and find shelter, an abandoned facility, a safe route, anything that isn't lined with claws and fangs. The film plays like something that will fit very comfortably into holiday TV rotation once the theatrical run is a memory. Big, loud, easy to follow, and not especially sticky in the mind once it ends. And I have to say, if this story's miracle medicine never materializes, someone should at least commercialize the real miracle, Jonathan Bailey's glasses. Through salt water, sprinting, chaos, impacts, and general apocalypse conditions, those things stay perfectly aligned like they're anchored to his face with aerospace engineering. Bottom line, not a disaster, not a triumph. More of a serviceable franchise entry. It's a solid 2-hour couch watch, especially if it's already included with your subscription, but it doesn't have the spark, character texture, or edge-of-seat magic that made the best Jurassic movies feel like events. If you want a ready-made summer crowd pleaser, the recipe is simple: dinosaurs, corporate arrogance, and a famous star who can carry an action scene like it's nothing. Add Scarlett Johansson as a hardened, no-nonsense hired gun, and from a studio's perspective, you can practically hear the cash registers warming up. The trouble is that a big-budget package can't hide a flimsy foundation forever, and Jurassic Park Rebirth 2025 feels like it's running on brand recognition more than genuine inspiration. I caught it in theaters with my daughter, and I'll give it this: the movie knows how to deliver 2 hours of straightforward, turn-your-brain-off spectacle. In my country, it was released under a different title, Renaissance, and honestly, that fits. The film is less a bold new chapter and more a glossy attempt to revive something that's been fading for a while. The setup is pure franchise machinery. A pharmaceutical company bankrolls a mission into hazardous territory to collect living dinosaur DNA in hopes of engineering a breakthrough treatment for heart-related illness. Of course, the catch is that the remaining dinosaurs aren't hanging out in safe, tourist-friendly zones, and obtaining what the company wants requires getting dangerously close while the animals are still alive. Predictably, the creatures don't cooperate, and this scientific miracle pitch starts looking a lot like a glorified treasure hunt with teeth. The film is directed by Gareth Edwards, and the cast is stacked. Johansson alongside Mahershala Ali, Jonathan Bailey, and Rupert Friend. Nobody embarrasses themselves. The performances are competent across the board, but good acting can only do so much when the story leans this heavily on familiar beats. It's one of those scripts held together by recycled tensions, stock character roles, and the kind of "we've seen this before" turns you can call scene early. And that familiarity becomes the film's biggest weakness. Once again, the series defaults to the same engine sad face 1. Powerful interests chasing profit. 2. Experts with gear and bravado. 3. Unlucky civilians caught in the crossfire. And 4. Dinosaurs doing what dinosaurs do. Swap a few species, throw in a new team, sprinkle in modern gloss, and you've basically got the same ride with a different paint job. It doesn't help that the movie's survival logic feels selective. You can watch trained professionals drop like dominoes while the more heartwarming characters somehow dodge disaster again and again, even when the set pieces scream that they shouldn't. It's less suspenseful when you can sense the plot armor from a mile away. Still, Rebirth isn't completely devoid of highlights, especially in 3D. A few sequences stand out as genuine theatrical moments. An early chase on the water, a vertical climbing set piece that squeezes some real tension out of the environment, and one tight, enclosed sequence that plays like a classic suspense beat with modern polish. Edwards clearly understands scale and movement, and when the movie commits to pure spectacle, it works. Where it stumbles hard is in the creative choices that are supposed to make it feel new. The idea of mutant dinosaurs, for example, comes off less like an exciting evolution and more like a desperate attempt to raise the stakes with a gimmick. And by the time the film rolls out its big final creature moment, the payoff lands with a thud, more groan than gasp. Even the familiar "someone tries to run off with the priceless sample" subplot feels especially tired here, because it's not even presented with a fresh twist. It's the same old greed-fueled betrayal, just going through the motions. So where does that leave the franchise? Honestly, I walked out wondering if this series is still capable of surprising anyone who's been along for the ride since the earlier films. The original run had a natural arc, and the later reboots prove there's still money in the name. But money isn't the same as magic. Rebirth didn't bring back the wonder for me. If anything, it reinforced the disconnect I already felt after the most recent entries. In the end, I can't call it a total waste. My family and I still had a fun, noisy night at the movies. But as a story, it's shallow and overly familiar. For me, it's a 5 out of 10, a slick theme park ride that's watchable in the moment, then forgettable the second you leave the theater. If you're hoping for a true revival of what made Jurassic feel special, you might want to sit this one out. Altogether, even with its wildly over-the-top setup, this newest Jurassic entry still manages to feel lively without losing the theme park, popcorn movie spirit that's basically baked into the franchise. Before diving into it, I went back and rewatched the earlier films. Honestly, I put them all in the same general tier: solid, fun, and roughly a 7/10 across the board. When one movie's story stumbles, it usually makes up for it somewhere else. Stronger performances, smoother effects, a better set piece, you name it. That pattern continues here. The acting is noticeably stronger, the visuals look great, and the production has that polished, big summer event shine. But the narrative? Once again, it's powered by people making questionable choices, like they're competing for the worst decision under pressure award. And the central conflict is familiar. It's the same push-pull we've seen again and again. The people arguing for the dinosaurs' well-being versus the people who see dollar signs and teeth and claws. That moral tug-of-war is part of the series' DNA, sure, but after so many installments, it started to feel like the movie is hitting the same button and expecting a new sound. I had fun, absolutely. It's a perfect snacks in hand, brain on low power kind of watch. But there's a point where repetition catches up, and for me, the franchise is brushing right up against that line. It's also hard not to feel the weight of history. More than 3 decades have passed since John Hammond promised he'd spare no expense. and chaos theory warnings echoed as jeeps tore through rain-soaked jungle roads. That original 1993 film didn't just entertain, it reshaped blockbuster filmmaking. Now, director Gareth Edwards steps in to deliver the seventh film in the long-running saga, with a screenplay by David Koepp, who returns after helping adapt the earliest chapters of the series. The movie kicks off with a flashback to an InGen facility from about 15 years ago, where secret experiments have pushed genetic tampering into full what could possibly go wrong territory. It doesn't take long before the danger is made very clear. Someone becomes the first unfortunate reminder that labs and apex predators don't mix. When one movie's story stumbles, it usually makes up for it somewhere else. Stronger performances, smoother effects, a better set piece, you name it. That pattern continues here. The acting is noticeably stronger, the visuals look great, and the production has that polished, big summer event shine. But the narrative? Once again, it's powered by people making questionable choices, like they're competing for the worst decision under pressure award. And the central conflict is familiar. It's the same push-pull we've seen again and again. The people arguing for the dinosaurs' well-being versus the people who see dollar signs in teeth and claws. That moral tug-of-war is part of the series' DNA, sure, but after so many installments, it started to feel like the movie is hitting the same button and expecting a new sound. I had fun, absolutely. It's a perfect snacks in hand, brain on low power kind of watch. But there's a point where repetition catches up, and for me, the franchise is brushing right up against that line. It's also hard not to feel the weight of history. More than 3 decades have passed since John Hammond promised he'd spare no expense, and chaos theory warnings echoed as jeeps tore through rain-soaked jungle roads. That original 1993 film didn't just entertain, it reshaped blockbuster filmmaking. Now, director Gareth Edwards steps in to deliver the 7th film in the long-running saga, with a screenplay by David Koepp, who returns after helping adapt the earliest chapters of the series. The movie kicks off with a flashback to an InGen facility from about 15 years ago, where secret experiments have pushed genetic tampering into full what could possibly go wrong territory. It doesn't take long before the danger is made very clear. Someone becomes the first unfortunate reminder that labs and apex predators don't mix. Fast forward to the present day, set several years after the events of Dominion, and the world has somehow reached a strange new normal. Dinosaurs are no longer shocking headline material. In fact, the public seems oddly tired of them, while many of the animals released in the wild are dying off due to environmental instability, much of it caused by humans being humans. The exception is a remote, equatorial island where the climate is closer to prehistoric conditions and the creatures have been left to roam freely. It's off limits to civilians, officially a sanctuary, and conveniently, it also happens to have a shady InGen history. That's where the plot engine kicks in. A pharmaceutical power player, Martin Krebs, Rupert Friend, bankrolls an expedition to gather DNA samples from the biggest heavyweights across 3 domains: land, sea, and air. The catch is a huge one. The material has to be taken from living animals, not fossils or leftovers. The promise is that the DNA could unlock major medical breakthroughs, but the mission is drenched in the usual mix of ambition, greed, and corporate spin. To get the job done, Krebs recruits Zora Bennett, Scarlett Johansson, a battle-ready contractor brought in for high-risk protection and rapid response. He also brings along Dr. Henry Loomis, Jonathan Bailey, a paleontologist with direct academic ties to the old-school legacy of the franchise. Zora rounds out the team with her own picks, including Duncan Kincaid, Mahershala Ali, a seasoned captain with the kind of calm you only get from surviving too many bad days at sea. Meanwhile, the film introduces a separate group, a family sailing the same waters. Ruben, Manuel Garcerulfo, is traveling with his 2 daughters, college-age Teresa, Luna Blaze, and bright, fearless 11-year-old Isabella Audrina Miranda, plus Teresa's boyfriend Xavier, David Iacono, who brings a mix of humor and helplessness. This subplot serves a clear purpose. It gives the audience regular people to latch onto, and it provides the franchise-required ingredient of kids in danger without forcing the main mission crew into that role. Once the inevitable oceanside dino encounter happens, the groups collide, chaos escalates, and the movie begins doing what these films always do, splitting characters apart, putting them into separate survival tracks, and gradually thinning the roster as the island turns into a giant, living obstacle course. The good news is the movie understands why people show up. The island looks incredible, and the dinosaur action is frequent enough that there's rarely a long lull between major moments. The creatures are the headline, and the film treats them that way. Big reveals, tense stalking scenes, sudden ambushes, and a steady rhythm of "you are not safe here." One standout sequence involves a T-Rex encounter near a river that plays like a greatest hits chase scene, with a fun nod to the franchise's literary roots. And yes, this is still a Jurassic movie, so you can usually predict who the real villain is, what kinds of choices they'll make, and the general outcome of those choices. The film tries to balance that with a more principled angle through Loomis, who, despite being more museum professional than jungle survivalist, shows flashes of courage and quick thinking when it counts. The title Rebirth also hangs over the story like a question the film keeps teasing. Exactly what is being reborn here? Nature, humanity's obsession, the franchise itself, depends on how generous you feel. The biggest new ingredient is the mutated creatures, including a hyped-up predator that looks engineered to be the next iconic nightmare. Whether those additions feel exciting or a little too far in a monster movie territory will come down to your tolerance for the series dialing up the weird. As for Johansson as the hardened action lead, it works if you buy into the film's heightened tone. If you're picky about that sort of casting, you might feel the movie asking you to accept her toughness more than it earns it. But either way, the presentation does a lot of heavy lifting. The cinematography is consistently striking, and the score, while weaving in familiar musical DNA, adds a classic, sweeping energy that fits the franchise's sense of spectacle. In the end, this is a crowd-pleasing, big-budget adventure packed with nods to what came before. It looks great, moves fast, and delivers plenty of dinosaur thrills. It just doesn't escape the franchise's biggest problem. The core storyline keeps circling the same ideas with slightly different packaging. Still, if what you want is a loud, glossy summer blockbuster where humans do dumb things and dinosaurs make them pay for it, you'll probably leave satisfied. Jurassic World Rebirth tries to sell itself as a fresh start, but it mostly plays like a remix of better moments from earlier entries, especially the wonder and dread template of Spielberg's 1993 Jurassic Park, with a few echoes of the airborne chaos from Jurassic Park 3. It was filmed during the summer of 2024 and lands as the seventh installment in the broader Jurassic film series, and you can feel the franchise DNA stamped on nearly every scene. One of the movie's big creature highlights is its giant flyer. It's clearly meant to scratch the same itch as the Pteranodon sequences from the third film, only scaled up to mythic monster proportions, bigger wings, heavier body, and stage for maximum, oh no, energy. If you're showing up for colossal animal horror, jungle mayhem, and that old-school expedition goes sideways vibe, think classic giant creature adventure movies. This one does deliver a steady stream of set pieces. The locations help a lot. Production hopped across England, New York City, Malta, notably for sequences tied to the ocean predator, and then leaned heavily on Thailand, where the landscapes do most of the heavy lifting. Dense green, steep cliffs, and postcard beaches that scream, "You shouldn't be here." Visually, it's often striking, and the effects work is generally solid. The story takes place years after the chaos of earlier films, with Earth's balance continuing to unravel. Dinosaurs aren't roaming everywhere anymore. Instead, they're boxed into a narrow equatorial zone where humans aren't supposed to go. Naturally, the movie immediately gives us a reason to go anyway. Massive money is attached to collecting live blood samples from the biggest remaining prehistoric species across sea, land, and sky. That's where Zora Bennett, Scarlett Johansson, comes in, a highly capable mercenary type hired for a mission that's illegal, dangerous, and extremely profitable for the people who won't have to do the dying. She's paired with Duncan, Mahershala Ali, and the two are surrounded by a familiar, assembled for a mission crew, tough professionals, a scientist for exposition, and corporate interests hovering in the background with suspiciously neat motives. Then the film tosses in a stranded family, dad, two daughters, and the older daughter's boyfriend, after their ocean crossing turns into a disaster. From that point, the movie clicks into the franchise's most dependable mode: survive, run, regroup, get chased again, repeat, with the sample collection mission running alongside the rescue plot. And that's the frustrating part. The ingredients are there. The cast is game. The action staging is often strong. There's a standout T-Rex sequence that genuinely works, tense, scary, and paced like it actually wants you to fear the animal instead of just admire it. But the script lets everything down. The writing feels oddly slapdash for a series this big. Plot threads are introduced like they matter, then quietly dropped. Character depth is so uneven you can practically predict who's doomed just by how little effort the movie spends on them. And instead of feeling like a bold new direction, Rebirth gives off the vibe of a franchise trying to solve problems created by earlier installments, only to replace them with different problems of the same kind. Even the danger has a kid show ease to it. People walk away from falls that should end them. Dinosaurs appear right on schedule, as if they're waiting behind a curtain for their cue. Sea monsters conveniently behave like they're restricted to shoreline appearances, and escaping peril often feels less like survival and more like dodging something mildly annoying. At 2 hours and 13 minutes, it's also padded. You can feel the momentum sag in the middle stretch. The action starts to blur into repetition, and the experience slips into a haven't we done this already rhythm. This kind of movie works best when it's lean and hungry. Here, it overstays its welcome by a solid half hour. As for the star power, Johansson is undeniably a plus, but personally, the previous trilogy's big advantage, at least for me, was Bryce Dallas Howard, and I still think the series peaked, or came closest to being interesting again, with Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom, 2018. That one had a pulpy adventure feeling, a dash of old serial thrills, and a memorable gothic setting that made it stand out. Still, none of the sequels really touched the standard set by Spielberg's original. The 1993 film wasn't just popular, it was a genuine cinematic milestone. Awe, suspense, and pacing all working in sync. Later movies leaned harder on scale and spectacle, but the magic didn't return. The 2015 reboot made a fortune largely by tapping nostalgia, and everything afterward has felt like diminishing returns. Rebirth pushes that decline further, sometimes in a territory that feels closer to Saturday morning adventure fluff than a sharp blockbuster. With a stronger script, it could have been one of the better entries because the pieces are there. As it is, it's watchable, occasionally exciting, and ultimately forgettable. If this is what Rebirth looks like, the franchise may need something more radical than a refresh, maybe a long nap. Let's be honest, Jurassic World Rebirth wants to feel like a big return to form, but it mostly plays like a familiar rerun, only louder. The biggest issue is that the movie never feels new. Nearly every attack, chase, hiding moment, and character pause for emotion scene feels borrowed from earlier entries, and not in a fun, nostalgic way. It's more like watching a highlight reel of things you've already seen, except those older films did it with more tension, better timing, and more impact. So even when the movie is technically doing action, it often feels repetitive and strangely low energy. If there's one mercy, it's that the film doesn't overstay its welcome. It's brisk. It moves. It doesn't drag itself into exhaustion. And in this case, that shorter runtime feels like a genuine favor. Performances, a mixed bag on the acting side. The cast is stacked on paper, but the movie doesn't take full advantage of them. Scarlett Johansson looks like she's on autopilot. Her role doesn't give her much to play beyond reacting and moving the plot forward. Jonathan Bailey has potential, but his character is stuck in a narrow lane and doesn't really evolve. Mahershala Ali gets the closest thing to an emotional payoff near the end, but even he feels oddly sidelined for most of the runtime. Rupert Friend shows up as the predictable corporate snake, exactly the kind you've seen a dozen times in this franchise and beyond. Among the supporting cast, Manuel Garcia Rulfo is solid enough. Luna Blaze leaves little impression. David Iacono feels wasted. And honestly, Audrina Miranda is the standout, especially when she's paired with her surprisingly charming baby dinosaur companion, which is one of the few parts of the movie with actual personality. The spectacle isn't spectacular. A Jurassic film should own visuals and sound. That's part of the deal. But Rebirth underdelivers here too. The dinosaurs often look oddly standard, like variations of creatures we've already seen rendered with slightly different skins. The effects feel reused, and there's no creature reveal that really lands as iconic. The biggest disappointment might be the ocean creatures, because the concept is great, but the execution never matches the potential. In fact, it's hard not to think about how one sequence in Avatar, The Way of Water, delivered more awe and scale with ocean threats than this movie manages across its entire runtime. Even the sound work feels recycled. The same familiar roars, the same growls, the same audio cues that no longer hit. Direction and story. Safe to a fault, the editing is one of the film's strengths. It keeps the pace tight and prevents the movie from feeling bloated. But pace alone can't create wonder, and that's where the direction falls short. There's no real suspense, no jaw-dropping set piece, no moment that makes you stop and think, yep, that's why this franchise exists. A Jurassic movie needs at least one scene that becomes instantly memorable. Rebirth doesn't have it. Worse, it leans too heavily on referencing the original Jurassic Park, to the point where it starts making you wish you were watching that instead. You can feel it constantly nudging the audience like, remember this? Remember that? There's a flare moment, the wide-eyed awe shots, even a grim little nod that brings to mind Samuel L. Jackson's fate. And the opening stretch weirdly channels Jaws energy. Whether intentional or not, it's hard to miss. The best part, the Delgado family, the one section that genuinely works is the Delgado family. When the film focuses on them, it briefly taps into something closer to Spielberg-style adventure tension, the kind of danger that feels personal, immediate, and suspenseful. Those moments evoke the Lex and Tim's survival vibe from 1993, and for a while, the movie actually feels alive. But every time the story pivots back to the main plot line, the energy drops again. A few characters are basically walking future dinosaur snack signs, and the movie doesn't even pretend otherwise. The big villain trajectory is also painfully obvious, right down to the inevitable in-game monster moment, featuring a creature that, at times, resembles the Return of the Jedi, rancor more than anything genuinely terrifying or fresh. Honestly, if the movie had centered its narrative around the Delgado family instead of splitting attention, it might have landed as a real crowd pleaser. They're the heart of the film, and everything else struggles in comparison. The premise. In summary, the story follows Zora Bennett, who leads a high-level team into the most dangerous place on Earth, an island-based research facility tied to the original Jurassic Park operations. The goal is to retrieve genetic samples from dinosaurs whose DNA could supposedly unlock major, life-saving medical breakthroughs. But as the mission escalates, the team uncovers a disturbing secret that's been buried for decades. That's a solid setup. It should work. In theory, many parts of this movie do work. The set pieces are competently staged, the filmmaking is often professional, the environments look tactile, and the score tries to balance nostalgia with new flavor. Some people will even find the character work better than expected for this kind of blockbuster. And yet, it still comes out strangely underwhelming. It's one of those movies where you can recognize the effort and craftsmanship, but you're still left thinking, why don't I care? Final verdict in the end, Jurassic World Rebirth isn't the revival this franchise needed. It's a cautious, half-committed entry that plays everything safe and ends up fading from memory almost immediately. Watch it if you've got nothing else lined up, or if you're going in with very low expectations. But if you want the real magic, you're better off revisiting Spielberg's Jurassic Park, 1993, or even checking out the silent-era classic The Lost World, 1925, for a reminder that this kind of adventure storytelling has had teeth for a long time. At this point, the franchise doesn't need another sequel. It needs an extinction event. After watching it, I kept coming back to one question. How could something built with this much craft feel so flat? Because you could tell a lot of individual parts were made with real effort. The effects are polished. The set pieces are designed to impress. The creatures look fantastic, and the movie clearly wants you to feel that classic Jurassic wonder. But somehow, when everything is stitched together, the result is strangely low energy. It's not that the film is terrible. It's more that it's rarely exciting in a way that sticks. The action works on a surface level. There are chases, there are intense moments, there's plenty of dinosaur chaos. But there's this weird, invisible distance between what's happening and how you feel while it's happening. Even when the movie is going full throttle, it's hard to truly lock in emotionally. On paper, it should be thrilling. In reality, it's mostly just functional. I actually like the concept. A standalone story living inside the Jurassic Park universe. Kind of like a one-off mission episode that doesn't need the full baggage of the other sequels. The problem is it keeps reaching back for the same lightning in a bottle the original had, and it just can't grab it. It tries to bring back the awe and beauty of the first film. Close, but not quite. It tries to recreate the fear and intensity. Sometimes it works. Mostly it doesn't, that it tries to bring back the fun. That spark rarely shows up. It gets some mileage out of the formula, but it never approaches the feeling Spielberg's classic delivered so effortlessly. Still, this is the funny part. Despite being underwhelming, it's honestly one of the stronger entries in the larger franchise, and that says more about the franchise's steady decline than it says about this movie being great. This series has been running on fumes for years, and yet it keeps making money because people still want dinosaurs on the big screen. And to be fair, if dinosaur spectacle is all you're looking for, this movie delivers a decent amount of it. For me, though, dinosaurs alone aren't enough anymore. I need stronger characters, sharper storytelling, or at least a sense that the film is building towards something surprising. In a way, this movie mirrors the very idea at the heart of the franchise. A corporation digging up the remains of something once magnificent, mixing it with safer, more generic ingredients, and pushing it back into the world because it still sells. It's impressive in a technical sense, but it feels engineered more than inspired. Built to work, not built to resonate. And even when it backfires, it still earns enough to justify doing it all again. So yeah, it's not bad. It's watchable. It's even occasionally cool. But it never really moves me, and it rarely gets under my skin. It's a little better than fine, which is kind of wild considering that makes it the best this series has felt in, over 2 decades? And then I had the final thought. Why do I keep showing up for these? Why do any of us? I guess movies find a way. Jurassic World. Rebirth, 2025. Review script rewritten, starring Scarlett Johansson, Mahershala Ali, Jonathan Bailey, Rupert Friend, Manuel Garciarulfo, Luna Blaze, David Iacono, Audrina Miranda. This time around, the franchise hits the reset button with Scarlett Johansson stepping into full-on action lead mode as a mercenary hired for a covert recovery mission. The job? Extract dinosaur DNA for a medical breakthrough tied to preventing heart disease. Funded, of course, by a questionable pharmaceutical power player, Rupert Friend, having a great time being unpleasant. That mission leads the crew back to familiar territory, a remote island near the equator, where the usual theme returns: human arrogance, corporate greed, and the belief that we can control nature if we just throw enough money and science at it. Spoiler, we can't. The film feels like it's borrowing pieces from several creature thriller playbooks. There's a bit of ocean terror energy, there's a please let these annoying people get eaten vibe in places, and there are flashes of grotesque mutation horror sprinkled in too. But even with those ingredients, the story can't fully escape a sense of repetition. The screenplay, David Koepp, who worked on the original, rarely surprises, and the direction, Gareth Edwards, is competent and visually strong, but often feels like it's running a well-worn track instead of forging a new path. That said, I went in with mixed expectations, and I actually ended up enjoying it more than I thought I would. What works, the positives, the smartest move the movie makes is simplifying the formula. It leans back into the adventure with dinosaurs core rather than burying everything under convoluted side plots. There's no heavy spy thriller overload here. Just a group of people on a dangerous mission trying to grab samples and survive long enough to leave. The cast is another big plus. Johansson, Ollie, Bailey, Friend, Garcerulfo, and the rest feel like the kind of ensemble the older films used. Characters you get to hang with long enough to understand and at least somewhat care about before the situation escalates. That extra breathing room helps. Visually, the dinosaurs are excellent. The CGI is top tier, and the creature work looks consistently strong, exactly what you'd expect from an Edwards-led film. And when the movie commits to action, it delivers. There's a good range of set pieces, and the pacing is at its best whenever it's letting the dinosaurs be scary, fast, and unpredictable. Best of all, the film brings back more of the franchise's horror flavor. A few sequences are genuinely tense, and some moments capture that classic Jurassic anxiety, where you're not just watching action, you're waiting for something to go horribly wrong. For most of Jurassic World, Rebirth's first half, one word kept looping in my head: perfunctory. I even try to get cute with it, because perfunctory kind of looks like it might hide the word perfect inside it, until I remembered that's not actually true unless you start cheating with letters. Honestly, that little mental detour sums up the vibe here. A movie that's trying to feel clever and nostalgic, but mostly ends up feeling familiar. To borrow a line that fits my mood, I'm tired, boss. And yes, it's still funny to me that John Coffey's name is basically coffee. Anyway, this film, it's fine. Serviceable. It does what it's supposed to do, and not much more. Now, I'll admit my bias up front. I'm an easy target for dinosaurs, giant creatures, and big screen chaos. So I'm often more forgiving of these entries than a lot of people. Even with that advantage, though, there isn't a ton here that made me sit up and go, now that was something. What you get instead are isolated moments, little flashes where it briefly feels like a Gareth Edwards spectacle. Scale, atmosphere, silhouettes, the small humans versus huge nightmare framing. There's even a sequence that basically flirts with kaiju territory, which will definitely make some people think of as Godzilla 2014 energy. But the overall approach? Extremely safe. If you thought Jurassic World 2015 played it cautiously, this one is like watching a film tiptoe across a carpeted room in socks. Nothing bold, nothing wild, nothing that truly risks losing the audience, except maybe patience if you've been on this ride too many times. And the more it goes on, the more it starts echoing the shape of the 1993 original. Similar rhythms, familiar beats, character types that feel like variations rather than inventions. It's like hearing the same track again, slightly remixed, slightly adjusted, close enough that you keep anticipating what comes next. I would make a stronger music analogy, but I don't know enough about music to pretend I do. Mixed for Jurassic World. Rebirth 2025, there are some character decisions that are stupid, but then again, that is always going to be a problem with any of these movies that aren't the 1993 original movie. Overall, Jurassic World. Rebirth 2025 was a nice return to form for the franchise, and while it's not going to win everyone over, I certainly had a great time with this movie. That really is the heart of it. People make questionable choices, sometimes outrageously so, but that's basically baked into the DNA of sequels like this. Still, as far as modern Jurassic entries go, this one feels like it at least remembers what the franchise is supposed to be. Tension, scale, humans outmatched, and dinosaurs that feel like a problem, not a background decoration. Plot-wise, the setup is classic franchise machinery. Dinosaurs haven't exactly adapted well across most of the world, and the survivors are concentrated in warmer regions. A corporate player, Martin Krebs' Rupert Friend, representing Parker Genix, claims he needs genetic material from 3 living dinosaurs for medical research tied to heart disease. To get it, he recruits Zora Bennett, Scarlett Johansson, to lead the mission, and Henry Loomis, Jonathan Bailey, as the scientific brain of the operation. Their destination is the island of Isle St. Hubert, a former InGen experimental site that was abandoned after a past incident, which is movie language for everything there is still dangerous and nobody learned anything. Performance-wise, the cast does a lot of heavy lifting. Johansson and Bailey have a solid, believable chemistry, and Mahershala Ali brings that effortless charisma that makes even routine scenes feel watchable. Visually, the movie often looks great. Edwards knows how to sell size and dread, and when a film slows down enough to let the atmosphere breathe, it's genuinely effective. The problem is the larger picture. It often feels like a scrapbook of Jurassic ideas rather than new chapter. You can spot pieces that resemble earlier films. The ordinary people caught in the disaster angle, the experts on a mission structure, the final boss monster escalation. It's not that those ingredients can't work. It's that Rebirth doesn't add enough of its own flavor to make them feel essential. The word I kept returning to after it ended wasn't bad. It was inessential. Rating-wise, I land around 3 out of 5, and even that can feel slightly generous depending on what you want from these movies. It isn't boring, but it can feel weirdly hollow, like a theme park ride you've been on a dozen times with a couple new animatronics added. I do think it's a bit stronger than the last 2 Jurassic World films, but that's not exactly a high bar. And regardless of what any of us think, it'll probably make a ridiculous amount of money. In the end, if you're there for dinosaurs, big creatures, and occasional flashes of cinematic scale, you'll likely have a decent time. If you're hoping for something that genuinely reinvents the franchise or brings a fresh angle, this probably won't be the one. And honestly, the series might benefit most from what it refuses to do: take a long break. So, beyond the standard corporate snake who predictably sells everyone out, the movie leans hard into the franchise's familiar survival blueprint. Expendable side characters get picked off one by one in gnarly set pieces, while the central crew keeps slipping away by sheer luck or plot armor, whether the danger comes from the shoreline, the jungle, or the sky. And yes, these prehistoric predators seem to come from everywhere, always hungry, always right on cue. This time around, the film also very openly tries to widen its reach by adding a family subplot designed to pull in a broader audience. We get the Delgado crew, a dad, his grown daughter, her useless boyfriend, and, because these movies can't resist, a sweet, scene-stealing little kid. The moment she appears, you can basically predict she's not just background decoration. And sure enough, she becomes central in a later sequence. And right on schedule, the kid ends up bonding with a baby dinosaur like it's a merchandising requirement. Honestly, it's almost shocking they didn't give it a Flintstone-style nickname and start printing plushies immediately. The expedition team lineup is equally easy to read. The greedy suit-chasing prophet, the tough, capable woman who's supposed to be the mission anchor, the cool guy who brings presence and calm, and the dinosaur-loving scientist who exists to remind us we should respect nature, right before nature bites someone in half. Still, as obvious as the human roles are, the real headliners are the mutated dinosaurs. Their attacks are staged in different flavors of nightmare, and the movie wears its monster movie inspirations proudly. At times it feels like it's echoing Jaws, Alien, Godzilla, and King Kong with a wink, like it knows exactly what lineage it's borrowing from. For me, the tension is a mixed bag. There are sequences that genuinely land, and others that feel corny or overly convenient. With Spielberg attached as executive producer, though, maybe I shouldn't be surprised the film swings between awe, pulp, and that a bit much all in the same breath. It's definitely not a new all-time classic, but the message is loud and clear. These dinos aren't going anywhere, and the studio is absolutely leaving the door wide open for more chapters. Rest easy. The dinosaurs make it out just fine. Now, speaking as someone who's been lukewarm on the last couple entries, I actually agree with the people saying this is an improvement. I'm glad I caught an RPX, and if IMAX had been an option, I'd have gone that route too. Though I'll admit F1 owning that premium format right now makes total sense, because that experience is unreal. The cinematography is one of the strongest parts here, along with a solid cast and a handful of wow moments that feel built for a huge screen. What surprised me most is the writing credit. David Koepp has delivered great work elsewhere, which makes the messy bits here stand out more. The movie is fun, honestly, and I don't think it deserves quite the level of hate it's been getting, but I also get why some people are dunking on it. There are clunky patches that are easy targets. Scarlett Johansson's character, Zora Bennett, is a good example. She's likable, but her security operative vibe doesn't always feel fully convincing. I've seen her feel more natural in other kinds of roles, so sometimes her tough guy moments come off a little forced. And the villain? The film basically telegraphs him instantly. There's no real mystery there. Even with those issues, I'd still say Jurassic World. Rebirth is the best of the modern sequels for me, though that's partly because the bar wasn't exactly high. Nothing touches Jurassic Park, 1993, which is still the only entry that truly nails storytelling, character work, and that sense of grounded wonder. With Spielberg attached as executive producer, though, maybe I shouldn't be surprised the film swings between awe, pulp, and that a bit much all in the same breath. It's definitely not a new all-time classic, but the message is loud and clear. These dinos aren't going anywhere, and the studio is absolutely leaving the door wide open for more chapters. Rest easy. The dinosaurs make it out just fine. Now, speaking as someone who's been lukewarm on the last couple entries, I actually agree with the people saying this is an improvement. I'm glad I caught an RPX, and if IMAX had been an option, I'd have gone that route too. Though I'll admit F1 owning that premium format right now makes total sense, because that experience is unreal. The cinematography is one of the strongest parts here, along with a solid cast and a handful of wow moments that feel built for a huge screen. What surprised me most is the writing credit. David Koepp has delivered great work elsewhere, which makes the messy bits here stand out more. The movie is fun, honestly, and I don't think it deserves quite the level of hate it's been getting, but I also get why some people are dunking on it. There are clunky patches that are easy targets. Scarlett Johansson's character, Zora Bennett, is a good example. She's likable, but her security operative vibe doesn't always feel fully convincing. I've seen her feel more natural in other kinds of roles, so sometimes her tough guy moments come off a little forced. And the villain? The film basically telegraphs him instantly. There's no real mystery there. Even with those issues, I'd still say Jurassic World. Rebirth is the best of the modern sequels for me, though that's partly because the bar wasn't exactly high. Nothing touches Jurassic Park, 1993, which is still the only entry that truly nails storytelling, character work, and that sense of grounded wonder. The new movie even acknowledges the meta-reality. Public interest in dinosaurs has faded, and now they're mostly contained to a handful of islands near the equator. The story gives a reason for that, which works as long as you don't poke at it too hard. Naturally, the region is off limits, and naturally, people go there anyway. The setup is classic franchise logic. Martin Krebs, Rupert Friend, representing the pharmaceutical world, believes DNA from 3 specific dinosaurs could be the key to a breakthrough treatment for heart disease. It's the same kind of science meets greed pitch we've seen before. If it reminds you of Deep Blue Sea-style plotting, you're not wrong. Just swap the medical miracle target. He pulls in Zora as the mission specialist. She assembles a team, and off they go. Meanwhile, on the same dangerous waters, Ruben Delgado, Manuel Garcerulfo, is out sailing with his daughters Teresa and Isabella plus Teresa's boyfriend Xavier, which is a decision so irresponsible it almost feels like the script needed them there, and I didn't care how. Unsurprisingly, sea creatures flip their boat, they're rescued, and then everyone ends up stranded on an island where survival becomes the only mission that matters. It's the same recipe we've tasted before, but it goes down easier this time. The humor actually works more often than it doesn't, and it avoids the overly goofy, forced look how funny we are vibe that dragged down parts of the Chris Pratt era. No disrespect, but those films leaned in a slapstick way too hard. Visually, it's uneven. Some effects are genuinely impressive, but other shots, especially some backgrounds, look weirdly artificial, which is frustrating because CGI should be better than this by now. Ironically, the original 1993 film still looks more believable in places. The director clearly tries to chase that original magic, and while it doesn't match the classic, it gets closer than the recent entries. The new movie even acknowledges the meta-reality. Public interest in dinosaurs has faded, and now they're mostly contained to a handful of islands near the equator. The story gives a reason for that, which works as long as you don't poke at it too hard. Naturally, the region is off limits, and naturally, people go there anyway. The setup is classic franchise logic. Martin Krebs, Rupert Friend, representing the pharmaceutical world, believes DNA from 3 specific dinosaurs could be the key to a breakthrough treatment for heart disease. It's the same kind of science meets greed pitch we've seen before. If it reminds you of Deep Blue Sea-style plotting, you're not wrong. Just swap the medical miracle target. He pulls in Zora as the mission specialist. She assembles a team, and off they go. Meanwhile, on the same dangerous waters, Ruben Delgado, Manuel Garcerulfo, is out sailing with his daughters Teresa and Isabella plus Teresa's boyfriend Xavier, which is a decision so irresponsible it almost feels like the script needed them there, and I didn't care how. Unsurprisingly, sea creatures flip their boat, they're rescued, and then everyone ends up stranded on an island where survival becomes the only mission that matters. It's the same recipe we've tasted before, but it goes down easier this time. The humor actually works more often than it doesn't, and it avoids the overly goofy, forced look how funny we are vibe that dragged down parts of the Chris Pratt era. No disrespect, but those films leaned in a slapstick way too hard. Visually, it's uneven. Some effects are genuinely impressive, but other shots, especially some backgrounds, look weirdly artificial, which is frustrating because CGI should be better than this by now. Ironically, the original 1993 film still looks more believable in places. The director clearly tries to chase that original magic, and while it doesn't match the classic, it gets closer than the recent entries. It's clearly meant to echo the classic Jurassic Park reveal. But in this universe, dinosaurs have been public reality for decades. This man's entire career is dinosaurs. Yes, they toss in a line about it's different in their natural habitat, but the scene still feels manufactured, like the movie is cosplaying a better film. 3. We can't find the biggest land dino. Might be the dumbest hide-and-seek ever. They're tracking a dinosaur larger than the giants we already know. They're standing in grass that's maybe knee-high, and they can't spot it because it's lying down. That's the explanation. Then it stands up, and the grass doesn't even cover its ankles. I'm sorry, what? 4. The disappearing Rex trick is pure magic that a T-Rex is visible in the background. A character triggers an auto-inflating raft, which pops up and blocks the view for a moment. 2 seconds later, the raft drops out of frame, and the Rex is gone. Not moved behind something, not walked away loudly, just vanished. This is an animal whose footsteps are basically a natural disaster, yet it somehow achieves smoke bomb stealth. It's like the movie wanted a cool beat and didn't care how it got there. 5. The DNA mission plan is a sieve full of holes. They keep insisting this dinosaur DNA is worth a fortune, world-changing, trillion-dollar stakes, and then the operation is run with the planning of a bad bachelor party. Bare-bones security, limited backup, and no obvious safeguard against theft or failure. Why not bring more support? Why not use drones for close approach? Why not have extraction and retrieval staged properly, like a real high-value operation? The movie waves its hands and goes, "Trust us," but the whole setup is so flimsy it becomes distracting. 6. The egg extraction is presented as safe, but the visuals contradict it. For the flying dino sample, the scientist opts to pull fluid from an egg to avoid risk. My first thought was, so now you're fine with endangering a baby dinosaur? Then the script rushes in with a justification. It won't harm the embryo. Okay, sure, I'll grant it, in theory, but then they show the amount extracted, and it's a massive portion of the egg. Like an absurd amount. You're telling me the embryo's fine after losing that much internal volume? Be serious. The scene tries to have it both ways. Ethical choice and dramatic visual, and they don't reconcile. And those are just the big ones I remember offhand. There are plenty of smaller logic hiccups stacked around them. If you enjoy nitpicking movies, you're going to eat well. The frustrating part is the premise is already a guaranteed crowd pleaser. Dinosaurs plus danger plus survival. How do you fumble something this hard when the baseline is that easy? If I'm trying to be generous, I can see why some people might call this one of the better entries in the later era franchise. The effects are slick, and there are stretches where the action lands. The pacing is weird up top, though. Too much time spent on the sea stuff before the film finally gets to the island survival beats, where it becomes more watchable. Scarlett Johansson does what she can with the material. She plays the lead tough guy advisor like she knows she's in a disposable summer blockbuster, and she's saving her real energy for a script that deserves it. The supporting cast is serviceable, with the boat captain having more personality than most. Visually, it's a strong-looking film, and one smaller dino in particular is genuinely impressive in a way the bigger set pieces weirdly aren't. So, yeah, as loud, glossy action entertainment, it'll work for families with low expectations, though it's definitely on the violent side for the youngest kids. But if you want smart plotting, characters you care about, or tension that comes from anything other than people making obviously bad choices, survival is a long shot. After a punchy opening that delivers the kind of dinosaur chaos we all came for, the movie introduces its main wild card, a tough, glamorous extraction team leader played by Scarlett Johansson. She's immediately positioned as the film's anchor, and honestly, she's the closest thing the story has to a truly engaging presence. Do I buy a megacorporation sending someone who looks like she stepped out of a fashion campaign to lead a monster hunting mission? Not completely. I'd expect a grizzled, big-game specialist built like a tank. But Johansson sells it well enough that I stopped arguing with the casting choice and rolled with it. From there, Rebirth heads into familiar franchise territory. A high-risk expedition near the equator, dinosaurs that refuse to cooperate, and a lineup of characters that feel like they were assembled from a studio checklist. Heroes, villains, a cool professional, a slimy corporate suit, and a family that gets pulled into the madness. One of the newcomers, Henry Loomis, is exactly the kind of spaced-out guy you'd expect in a blockbuster like this. Confused at first, then weirdly competent once the danger starts stacking up. The team's mission is to recover dinosaur blood samples, which are being pitched as the key ingredient for breakthrough medicine aimed at reducing heart disease. And I'll give the movie this. At least it tries to pretend the goal is something bigger than money. For once, it gestures at the idea of helping humanity instead of just doing capitalism with teeth. That said, the corporate angle still oozes greed through every scene. The company's representative, Martin Rupert Friend, plays the standard polished predator in a suit, smiling, smug, and clearly there to turn the mission into a money-printing machine. The film barely bothers to hide where his arc is headed either. Under the unbreakable rules of blockbuster karma, characters like him don't usually make it to the end credits without becoming reptile leftovers. Where the movie stumbles is in how it splits its attention. The stranded family subplot feels like dead weight. Their arguments and minor drama slow the pacing without adding much emotional payoff. Instead of raising stakes, their scenes mostly interrupt the momentum, like the movie is pausing the ride to deal with distractions that don't deepen the main story. The script does improve whenever Johansson's character shares space with Duncan Mahershala Ali, her former mercenary partner. When those two interact, the movie finally matches the ability of its biggest performers. Their exchanges have a sharper rhythm, more personality, and better energy than the standard-issue dialogue everyone else is stuck with. Visually, the film doesn't always hit the mark. Some shots feel oddly hazy and soft, like the crisp realism of earlier entries has been traded for a murkier texture. A few moments even land with a rough, nearly captured-on-the-fly look, except without the tension or creativity that makes found-footage-style visuals exciting. It's not ugly, but it's not consistently impressive either, especially for a franchise that used to make dinosaurs feel real. The music, though, helps a lot. Alexander Desplat's score pushes the action forward and lightly echoes the classic adventure sound that made the original films feel iconic. It doesn't reinvent the wheel, but it does remind you what this series used to be at its best. Action-wise, Rebirth is entertaining enough. It's not in the same league as something like Mission Impossible when it comes to choreography, escalation, or sheer craft, but it works as a summer theater experience. Air conditioning, popcorn, big creatures, and a couple of solid set pieces. And here's the twist. Even though it uses plenty of franchise staples, convenient saves, predictable sacrifices, this plan will definitely work. Optimism, kids in danger, and nostalgia sprinkled in like seasoning. It somehow feels more alive than the last few installments. It's still a Jurassic movie, meaning you can often guess who's going to be dinosaur food long before it happens. But despite all the cliches, this one has a spark the recent entries didn't. Honestly, I went in expecting fine, forgettable, slightly better than the last two. Instead, I walked out thinking it's the strongest Jurassic entry in decades. Certainly the best since the original era, and shockingly fun for a series that has been coasting for years. Still, I can't help asking, where are the characters and scripts that made this universe unforgettable? Where are the sharp performances and iconic trio energy we used to get? The movie is enjoyable, but it also feels like a reminder of what's missing. In the end, Jurassic World Rebirth isn't revolutionary, but it's a solid adventure that finally remembers the franchise is supposed to be fun. It kept me engaged in the moment, even if I'm not sure how much of it will stick with me a week later. I'm not going to lie, I'm relieved this franchise found its footing again. After the last couple entries felt more like flashy tech demos than actual movies, Part 7, Jurassic World Rebirth, feels like a legit bounce back. This one brings in a strong cast: Scarlett Johansson, Jonathan Bailey, Rupert Friend, and Mahershala Ali, with Gareth Edwards directing. The setup is simple. A high-risk mission heads into a restricted, dino-infested zone to collect DNA samples, because certain prehistoric genes could lead to major medical breakthroughs. Johansson plays Zora Bennett, a capable, no-nonsense operator who's basically built for this kind of job. Bailey plays Henry, a forensic doctor pulled into the chaos, and Friend shows up as the corporate suit with a big agenda. Getting them, there's Ollie as the boat captain, and from that point on, it becomes a survival ride. Things get even messy, when a family gets caught in the middle after things go sideways at sea. From there, the movie runs on two tracks: the mission team trying to complete the extraction and the family trying to stay alive long enough to get out. And honestly, that split is both the film's strength and its biggest problem. Because while I had fun, it sometimes feels like the movie is juggling two different stories that don't always blend smoothly. One minute, it's leaning hard into the family in danger angle, and the next it snaps back to Zora and Henry's storyline like it's a separate film. I didn't hate either thread, I just wanted a tighter weave between them. That said, when the movie is in dinosaur mode, it delivers. Edwards knows how to build tension and stage action in a way that feels big, sharp, and readable. The set pieces do what you want them to do: thrilling, chaotic, and occasionally intense, with a few moments that try to tap into that old-school Jurassic suspense. The human drama, though, that's where it wobbles. The movie moves fast and looks great, but some character beats feel undercooked, like the script hit the plot points but didn't fully earn the emotional ones. By the time the finale rolls around, it's entertaining, but it doesn't land with the punch it's aiming for. Still, I enjoyed it, and I'd call it a clear improvement over the previous couple films. Also, I've got to say it, Johansson and Bailey have genuinely strong chemistry, and they're a big reason the movie stays watchable even when the writing gets thin. So here's my recommendation. If you love the 1993 Spielberg-style Jurassic feel, you'll probably have a good time with this. If you're expecting it to match the Chris Pratt-era tone, you might walk away disappointed. It's not perfect, and it doesn't reinvent the franchise, but as a crowd-pleasing blockbuster with solid dino mayhem, it's a fun ride. And for this series right now, fun and focused is a win. You can feel what kind of movie Jurassic World Rebirth is almost immediately. When the film opens with something as ridiculous as a Snickers wrapper triggering a catastrophic malfunction inside a secret dinosaur lab, leading to instant mayhem, it basically hands you a warning label in the first 5 minutes. From that point on, you know you're in for spectacle first, logic last. And honestly, that pretty much sums up the entire experience. A big issue is how disposable so many characters feel. The movie introduces 3 or 4. Who are you again? People whose only purpose is to exist long enough to become dinosaur snacks. They're not written as real humans, just moving targets. It's hard to care when the film doesn't even try to make them matter. Then there are the dinosaurs themselves. Instead of feeling fresh or inspired, it's like the filmmakers went shopping through the franchise's greatest hits. Grab a dino from this film, another from that one, line them up, allot each a few minutes of screen time, and call it a day. It works on a surface level because, hey, dinosaurs, but it also makes the whole thing feel manufactured, like a checklist pretending to be a movie, which is frustrating because it's kind of painful watching a franchise with so much legacy land in such a safe, recycled place, especially if you've stuck with it since the beginning. It's not just disappointing, it's a little embarrassing. What surprised me even more is that this is a Gareth Edwards movie. I never expected one of his films to feel this flat. There are moments of scale and technical skill, sure, but the personality feels muted. The spirit isn't gone completely, but it's definitely not roaring. That said, Rebirth absolutely leans hard into nostalgia, and it's not subtle about it. If you've seen the earlier Jurassic films, especially the classics, you'll catch references constantly. There are echoes of almost every entry in the series, like the director is banking on recognition as a substitute for originality. But weirdly, it still works more often than it should. The biggest win here is the action. This might be the most non-stop, full-throttle Jurassic movie yet. You get chaos on land, in the ocean, and in the air, and that variety keeps things moving. When the movie decides to go big, it commits, and those set pieces can be genuinely thrilling. Visually, it's mostly impressive too. The CGI is often sharp and cinematic, better than a lot of what the franchise has delivered before. Although I'll admit, a few shots look strangely outdated, like the effects briefly time travel back to the early 90s. It's inconsistent in places, but overall it's still a great-looking film. My main visual complaint isn't the effects, it's the setting. The island doesn't feel like Isla Nublar or anything grounded in reality. It looks like something out of an epic fantasy adventure. More Skull Island/Hollow Earth than Jurassic Park. Beautiful? Absolutely. But it drifts away from the original vibe of realistic remote island experiment gone wrong. And the final creature? Honestly, it doesn't feel like it belongs here. Even with the genetically engineered explanation, the design leans more alien sci-fi horror than dinosaur. It's the kind of thing that screams franchise escalation rather than natural evolution. Now the cast. Scarlett Johansson leads this time. And yes, the idea of seeing her in 3D facing off against dinosaurs is basically the movie's strongest marketing pitch. She looks great on screen, but the movie takes too long to get where it needs to go. I'm not exaggerating when I say I was already getting restless while the story was still stuck in New York. Mahershala Ali is the only other casting choice that really grabbed me, but even he's stuck dealing with some wild writing choices. One moment in particular is so ridiculous it's almost funny. We last see him holding a flare with a monster basically inches from his face, cut to sad music. Then minutes later he shows up totally fine. Not a scratch. No explanation. That moment alone felt like the perfect symbol for how this movie treats stakes. Everyone else ranges from forgettable to actively annoying. There's a family subplot that the film clearly wants you to invest in emotionally, but it didn't work for me at all. I wasn't rooting for them to die or anything. I just didn't care. And that's worse. Indifference is the real killer in a movie like this. Story-wise, the film begins with a flashback set 17 years earlier on Isle St. Hubert near French Guiana, where a secret lab suffers a containment failure. Then we jump to the present, where the world has mostly lost interest in dinosaurs. Naturally, some genius decides the solution is to collect DNA sample from a few dangerous species, so a team gets recruited and heads to equatorial islands for the mission. The first half moves slowly, mostly setting the pieces on the board. The second half is where it finally kicks into gear, and that's where the movie becomes what people came to see. In terms of tone, it's basically trying to swing back toward the feel of the earlier films, even though it technically follows Jurassic World Dominion. It doesn't fully recapture that magic, but at least it's aiming in that direction. One element that really stands out is the music. The orchestral score is strong, and yes, the classic John Williams themes show up as expected, but there's also a polished new score from Alexander Desplat, and it adds a lot of weight. It's one of those details that makes it obvious the studio didn't cut corners. This is clearly a big-budget swing, reportedly around $180 million, and it shows.